Can you explain what grappling strength is and how is that different than normal strength? I think that grappling strength is two things. Number one, it's the ability to create a lot of isometric tension. What is isometric tensioning? It's when you configure your body in a certain position and then you simply hold that position, right? It's just static holding versus the concentric phase of the muscle movement, which is where you're making the muscle shorter under load, or the eccentric phase where you're making the muscle longer under load. When you go to the gym and lift weights, mostly you're training the concentric and the eccentric. It's rare to do a lot of isometric strength work in the gym. The high-level strength coaches, the guys that are really good, they know all about that, and they do have their athletes do a lot of isometric work. Guys like Steve Maxwell, the respected strength coach, as he's gotten older, he has become much more of a proponent of isometric strength. It's underrated, in my opinion, and jiu-jitsu will give you a lot of isometric strength. The second aspect, I think, of grappling strength is the ability to configure your body into angles and into bone structures that increase your ability to feel strong without having to use as much muscular strength. We've all felt that. You go with someone who's very, very skilled at jiu-jitsu, even if they're smaller and lighter than you are, and they feel like a ton of bricks. They're very, very heavy. Well, because it's the precise positioning, the ability to magnify your strength with pinpoint accuracy and to use those angles and those structures. And then you add to that the ability to create a high degree of isometric strength. And I think that's what grappling strength is. How do you stay motivated? Been training for a year and it's getting harder to motivate myself to go to class as consistently. This is a challenge not just in jiu-jitsu, but in every aspect of our life. The truth of the matter is most people quit most things they take up. How many people decide to learn the guitar? They play for a few months and then eventually the guitar goes back in the case. It gets slid, they slide it under their bed, and they never touch the guitar again. This is common. Most people are quitters in that sense. And it's the same in jiu-jitsu. So how do you stay motivated? Well, let me give you a couple ideas. Number one, I think that you need to really turn your jiu-jitsu school into your tribe. You need to develop strong emotional connections, friendships with the people you train with, and seek out those people that will help you stay motivated. There's internal motivation and there's external motivation. If you can have that group, that tribe of people that create that external motivator to keep training, then that can be very, very powerful. So that's one of the things that I would say to do is don't just feel like you're alone in the world. Reach out to people you train with and try to create maybe an accountability group where you text each other, where you just keep yourself accountable. Sometimes that little external motivator is what's going to keep you going in those times when your own internal motivation well is totally dry. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing about staying motivated is you really have to find reasons to train jiu-jitsu that transcend the things about jiu-jitsu that are frustrating to you. The reason people want to quit jiu-jitsu is because it's hard, right? You have to be the nail a lot more than the hammer for a long time in jiu-jitsu, and it just becomes a grind. So if all you're thinking about is the fact that it was hard and you got tapped and you didn't do very well, then of course you're going to get dejected and you're not going to make it. But if you recalibrate yourself to understand that those things are temporary and those are part of the journey and those are part of the process, but really the more important reasons to train are because it makes you healthy, because it's fun, because of the friendships, because of the skills you're learning. and you think about those benefits and not the fact that you failed a lot the last time you trained. So those are my pieces of advice for that. Good luck to you. When did you make the decision to go bald? I'm starting to thin and worried the time is coming. Curious when you shaved it off. I'm going to put up a photo of me before I shaved it off because I had a huge head of hair. But in my 30s, it started going, and I swore when I was young, I swore I would never be one of those guys that, is trying to hang on too long. My father had that 1970s comb over. He would comb, he had his long hair on one side that he would comb to the other side, hairspray it down. And even in those days, I would look at that and think, this is ridiculous. When the wind blew, it would do this. He couldn't spontaneously jump into a swimming pool because he was embarrassed of his hair. Even when I was young and it wasn't all that cool to be bald, I thought, I'm never going to be this guy. And then Michael Jordan came along and he made it cool to be bald. Thank you, Michael. And so for me, it was just, I got to a certain age where it just started going. Initially, I buzzed it short. And for a few years, I just had real cropped short hair. I'd go into my backyard with a trimmer and just shave it once a week. And then eventually I started losing my hair in the back a little more. It just, I'm a little vain. And at some point I just shaved it just because I wasn't digging the way it looked anymore. So that was my motivator once it got to a certain point. So good luck to you. During sparring, I always roll with random people, but I'm wondering whether you recommend selecting specific opponents for specific things you're trying to work on, or is there a ratio of more advanced and less advanced people that you try to roll with? That's a really interesting question. I do think that there's a ratio that you should try to generally seek out between people who are less skilled than you and people that are more skilled than you. If you're only training with people that are more skilled than you, you will never get a chance to develop an offense. You'll be on the run the whole time. You'll develop a very good defensive game, but you're not going to develop an offensive game. And if you train with only people that you're better than, you'll develop a great offensive game, but you won't really have to develop much of a defensive game. So you need both. I do think that you should train more with people that are less skilled than you, because if you think about what it takes to become really good at your techniques, the setups, the timing, seeing those windows of opportunity, it takes a lot of repetition during live training. And when you're going with someone that's roughly your level, you're not going to get as many opportunities to practice those things as when you go with people that are less skilled than you. When you're training with people that are less skilled, it becomes kind of a form of dynamic drilling. You are able to work yourself into the positions that you're trying to master and practice them over and over and over again. In fact, that's the other thing that I would recommend is not only train with people less skilled than you, a little more than guys that are more skilled, but always have a goal when you walk into the room and attempt to get yourself into those positions over and over and over again, because that's how you develop the ability to will whatever needs to happen during the roll. The other aspect to this is that, I'm very selective with the people I roll with, depending on what it is that I'm looking for on any particular day. Some nights I want to go real hard. I want to just gut it out and I pick the really tough guys in the room. Other days I just want to flow. I want to be playful, and you can't do that with everybody. So you have to be selective with those people. So excellent question. And I think you should be thoughtful about who you roll with and what you're trying to accomplish as you roll. Fat old blue belt training for over a year. New professor wants us all to compete and has dramatically increased the tempo and changed the culture of the academy. No more self-defense techniques, and sometimes classes are nothing but sparring. I'm here for my mental and physical health, to learn this very cool art, and for the friends and being part of a community. Is it time to look for me to look somewhere else? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with changing academies if the one you're in is just not doing it for you. Look, every school has a different feel to it. Every school has a different technical influence, a different technical lineage. Every school has different values, and those values usually trickle down from the top down. The instructor, their viewpoint tends to permeate throughout the room. And if the values of your instructor are not jibing with your way of looking at the world, then there's nothing wrong with finding a new school. If you're lucky that you have a few schools within, a 5-mile radius from your home, they need to be close enough that you're going to be motivated to keep training. But if you have a few places to choose, go try them all. Go watch, go jump into classes here and there and figure out where it feels the best. Jiu-jitsu is a very, very big art, and the expression of jiu-jitsu can run the gamut from intense to more playful, and you need to just pick a place that suits you. Curious how you approach the subject of self-defense. Love your channel. Thank you. The subject of self-defense is a very, very deep one, and it touches on many, many aspects. It's way too big a subject for this little Q&A, but let me just throw a few things out at you. We tend to think of self-defense as the techniques that we learn. Someone throws a punch, you learn to block, right? You learn to close the distance, you learn to take someone down, and so on. But I look at self-defense much more holistically. And I look at self-defense generally as a 4-stage process. Stage 1 is retaining high situational awareness everywhere you go and being willing to flee if there's anything that doesn't feel right. So, high situational awareness. When you go into a restaurant, you take the gunfighter seat. I had my family totally trained that when we walked into a restaurant, we would always pick a table where I could see the front door, the back door, the kitchen, and so on. And then I would take a minute, scan the room. Who's in the room? Is there someone that looks like they're about to go postal, or is everything chill? And then also just paying attention. Where are the exits? If some guy walks in with an AR-15, well, you might have to just run. And if you're having to figure out where to run, that might be too late. Or another way that I would express that high degree of situational awareness is that as I went through my daily life, maybe I had to walk downtown, I was running an errand, I would play little games with myself where I would try to count how many people with dark hair walked by, how many people with light hair, how many red cars, how many men versus women. Like, I would make it a little game to be aware and not just be staring at my phone or not just be in my own headspace. So that's number 1, high degree of situational awareness. If you can't flee, then number 2 is you have to manage the distance. As the Gracies say, manage the distance. Apparently I can't say that word. Manage the distance, manage the damage. And that doesn't just mean keeping someone out of arm's reach. It means you're at the farthest point in that environment from them. Someone's way over there and they look dangerous. I'm going to put myself way over there. So you manage that distance. If a violent encounter is imminent and I can't really manage the distance so far, then I have to manage it at close range. And then if it's on, if the altercation is on, assuming there aren't multiple attackers, if there are multiple attackers, you just have to start throwing punches and trying to get away, using obstacles in your environment, being creative about how you deal with angles, all that stuff. If it's one-on-one, you need to close the distance, take the person to the ground, and dominate them on the ground. Sometimes simply controlling someone is the correct response. Maybe they're just drunk and you just need to control them until someone shows up to help. Or, and this is number 4 of my points, you need to be willing to scale your response to whatever degree is necessary to deal with the threat. So, if it's a violent encounter and you really have to do damage to this person, anything goes. Eye gouges, nipple bites, grabbing a big handful of their junk and twisting it. Whatever you need to do. In a jiu-jitsu academy, we tend to have this gentleman's agreement where, we don't do certain things. We're not going to crank each other's necks. We're not going to, do the nasty stuff. But the problem with that is sometimes we lull ourselves into this way of expressing jiu-jitsu, which limits how far we can go when it's time to really go. And if it's time to really go, it's time to go, and you need to do whatever it takes to survive or whatever it takes to protect your family. That's how I look at self-defense. Again, this is a very deep subject. We could talk about this for hours, so I hope that helps. I'm curious about the mindset aspect of jiu-jitsu for each belt. That's another interesting question, and I assume you mean what should your mindset be at each belt level? Let's see if we can distill that. So if you were to ask me to share what each belt means using only one word, white belt would be survival, blue belt, fundamentals, purple belt, combinations, brown belt, pressure, and black belt, simplicity. And so within those words, I think conveys the mindset that you should have at that belt. So if white belt is the belt of survival, well, your mindset should be to embrace the suck, embrace the fact that it's hard, embrace the fact that you're going to be the nail a lot more than the hammer, and you're going to fail a lot. So the mindset should be a resilient one where you're just going to pay your dues and do whatever it takes, knowing that it's hard, but it's going to help you survive and get to the next level. Blue belt is the belt of combination or of fundamentals. So there too, I think as a blue belt, you should really focus your efforts on fundamentals. It's so common these days for people to go down the YouTube rabbit hole and just endless exploration, endless techniques that you're learning. But at blue belt, you should really focus your learning so that it's oriented toward the fundamentals, because that's really the foundation, and that's what's going to allow you to be successful at the highest levels. If you don't have good fundamentals, if you just have flashy techniques, or you have techniques that rely on speed and physical attributes, then you're going to hit a wall where you're not going to be able to deal with those guys that are much more technically sound. So I think blue belt, the mindset should be that you're going to master fundamentals, especially positional escapes, side mount escapes, back escapes, guard passing. Guard passing's hard. You should really focus your efforts on that as a blue belt. So develop a mindset where you're seeking mastery of the fundamentals. Purple belt, it's about combinations of techniques. It's no longer about one-dimensional attacks. It's about having 2 or 3 or 4 attacks that you can employ off of different situations. It's the belt where you use momentum. I mentioned a minute ago when I was talking about the purple belt, you use momentum and combinations and much more fluid movement. So the mindset, I think, should be one in which you are not committed to any one attack. You don't get tunnel vision. You don't try to impose your will. You're simply open to wherever you need to go to continue to advance your game. You always have that next thing you can go to. If one door closes, you can go to the next door. If that door closes, you have 2 or 3 other pathways. So I think the mindset should be to develop a well-rounded game that gives you those options so that you can express your game beautifully. Brown belt is the belt of pressure. And there too, you should seek to apply pressure from every position that you play in jiu-jitsu, both offensively and defensively. We think of pressure as something that you apply from the top, and we've all felt it, but really you should be able to apply pressure from anywhere. And as a brown belt, the mindset should be a tight, pressure-based game where you're not giving people any room to operate. The black belt is the belt of simplicity. You're trying to really hone those techniques so that your execution is so precise and so fundamentally sound and so perfect. The angles are perfect. The leverage is perfect. There's an elegant simplicity there. What used to take you maybe 10, 12 steps as a blue belt, as a black belt, you should be able to do in 1 or 2 steps. It should be very fluid and elegant. At black belt, you end up throwing away a lot of your game because you get to a point where you know your body so well, you know exactly what you like to do, you know exactly the things that give you success offensively and defensively, and you just focus your energy on mastering and perfecting and refining those things. So refinement should be, and simplicity should be the mindset at black belt. I'm very interested in the belt testing that you do. 1, what you require for each belt test. 2, how does a person choreograph their demonstration? 3, who chooses the partners for the rolling portion? And 4, how long does a person take to prepare? Not all schools have their students do a test. I think it's becoming more common now to have people do something. There needs to be some kind of rite of passage. But at a lot of academies, you're just awarded a belt when you're ready for that belt. I've certainly awarded many belts in that way. But I do think that there's something much more special about having your students put together a demonstration. We don't call them a test in our lineage. We call them a demonstration because presumably when you're asked to do the demonstration, you are at that level. You are pretty close to that level where you could be awarded the belt without a test, without a demonstration, and it would be perfectly fine. So, I never ask someone to do a demonstration until I know that they're pretty close to that level. And so then it becomes just a way to show your teammates, your family, show the world how good you are. There are 2 components to the test or the demonstration. The first is the technical portion, kata, where you're simply demonstrating all the techniques that are required for you to demonstrate. And the instructor is looking at your technical execution. We're looking to see if that execution is commensurate with your level, the precision, how well you move, the quality of your movement, the quality of your transitions, the precision of your grips, all of those things. And as you go up the belts, the requirements for that get harder and harder. You're expected to show progression in terms of your execution. A black belt showing a straight arm bar from closed guard should be much more precise and beautiful than a blue belt showing a straight arm bar from closed guard. The second portion is the rolling portion where fresh opponents are cycled in. And this is your chance to really be pushed at kind of a competition level intensity, and you can show your stuff. Who chooses the rolling partners? Well, they're chosen by the instructor, and it's a dynamic thing. It is a very dynamic thing. When I run someone through a demo and it's time to spar, I will choose people on the fly. I'll choose their first opponent and then the second opponent. Sometimes you have to modify that. Sometimes your goal as a teacher is to give someone a really tough time, make them really have to dig deep. But as you're going through this, you realize that it might be too much for them if you throw everybody that you intended at them. So sometimes you moderate that a little bit. It's just a feel thing. As far as what's required, to put a demonstration together, well, those requirements are given by the instructor. In our lineage, we don't choose the specific techniques that you have to demonstrate. You are given categories of techniques and a certain number of them that you have to assemble. So for blue belt, it's 50 techniques. You have to learn, or you have to showcase all the fundamental techniques: guard passes, side mount escapes, back escapes. You have to show arm bars from guard, arm bars from mount, chokes from guard. You have to show sweeps and takedowns and leg locks, all the fundamentals. But it's up to the student to select which techniques they want to showcase within that fundamental curriculum. For purple belt and beyond, it's much more difficult because in addition to individual techniques, you have to put together 10 combinations, 10 multi-technique combinations. What's a combination? It's a sequence that showcases several components to it. And so for purple belt, your 10 combinations don't have to be all that deep. 3 or 4 techniques per combination is fine, but that's still 30 or 40 things you're having to put together. For brown belt and above, you're expected to go deeper with your combinations. As a point of reference, when I did my black belt demonstration, my goal was to have 10 segments for every combination that I showcased, which was 100 techniques. And that was tough. That was tough to put together. It took me a long time to really put that together and drill it and get it looking fluid and all that. It takes some creativity. You have to really dig into your game. You have to think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish and put that together. For purple belt, you're not showing that many. For brown belt, you're probably doing more. For black belt, it's deeper than that. How long does it take? Well, a couple months, 3 months is pretty common. When I did my black belt demonstration, I was given 6 months to prepare. Mostly I used that time to prepare physically. It was only in the last 2 or 3 months that I put my demonstration together technically. So that's kind of how we do it. It's a little unique. Not everybody does it this way, but I'm a huge believer in that process because I think it always makes your game jump to that next level very decisively.